Chapter 8. Paris looked different during the daytime. At night it had been shadowed corners and grim streets. But now that the sun had risen, Anouk started to notice little things she hadn't before. A horse-head door knocker, a lazy cat blinking in a window, school children struggling under heavy backpacks. They entered a neighborhood that had fewer monuments and more shops and cafes. It was dirtier with vibrant graffiti on the walls, but Anouk liked it. Music played from a corner cafe where couples sat sipping coffee. Beau found a spot and parked the car. Anouk climbed out hesitantly, smoothing a hand uneasily over her dress. In the dress and the Faustine jacket, she looked just like everyone else. Looked, yes, but felt? Fear and anxiousness braided together inside her, screaming in her veins that she didn't belong here. Animal, creature, dark thing. Beau hurried around to meet her on the sidewalk. He was still in his chauffeur's uniform, but he had lost the blood-stained jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves. On impulse, she thrust her arm through his. He tensed in surprise. "This is the Latin Quarter," he explained. "It's mostly students, or at least it used to be. There are a few cheap chambres de bonne to rent, and Mata Vittoria doesn't give Cricket much of an allowance. This is her street on the left." His eyes scanned every shadow as they turned down a narrow and winding road with a small cafe tucked beneath an awning. A young couple sipped tea as they chatted. The man wore a bowler hat, set at a sharp angle, and a neon blue cravat. The woman had lime green makeup on her eyelids, fingernails painted a rainbow of colors. "Beau, look," she whispered. "Goblins." Both the man and the woman wore brass chains hooked to their belts like the kind Pretty used for pocket watches, but these were linked instead of the dainty china cups they sipped from. The goblins took their tea very seriously. Beau shook his head and didn't answer until they had passed the strange couple. "Those aren't goblins, they're pretties. It's the strangest thing, but non-traditional style of goblins has spread through the city. It's the latest fashion craze." Anouk looked over her shoulder at the couple's ears. It was true, not even the slightest point. "I didn't think the pretties knew about goblins. They don't. They're dressing up like creatures they don't even know exist. The goblins are just messing with them. You know how goblins are." They passed another pretty girl, dressed in garish goblin fashion. She was winding the pocket watch chain of her teacup lazily around one finger. Her eyes fell on Anouk. "Hey, cool jacket." Anouk beamed. She followed Beau to an unassuming door that opened onto a foyer filled with mailboxes and narrow staircase. It smelled of something stale and spicy. Beau started up the stairs. The two of them climbed until Anouk was out of breath. Beau stopped at a door and knocked hard. "Cricket," he called. "It's Beau. Let me in. It's important." The rest of the apartment building was filled with the gentle sounds of people starting to stir, slippered footsteps and percolating coffee. Morning light poured through the grimy window and the staircase. Anouk wondered if they'd be waking Cricket. She seemed the type to sleep in. But the door cracked open, a chain lock stretching taut, and music with a sharp beat came through the crack. Cricket was dressed in leggings and a white tank that showed her black bra underneath. Her curly brown hair was pulled back with yellow headphones. Her eyes were bleary like she hadn't slept. She gave Beau a sharp look. "Whatever that witch wants, tell her to wait until morning." "It is morning," Beau pointed out. Cricket squinted up at the sunlight coming through the hall window, as if she didn't trust it. She started to close the door, but Anouk thrust her shoe in the crack, preventing her. "Let us in, please." "Anouk?" Cricket's voice rose in surprise. "I hardly recognized you. Hang on." Anouk moved her foot, and Cricket slammed the door closed. The chain lock clinked, and the door opened fully. Cricket stared at Anouk. "What's going on? How did you get out of the house? And whose jacket is that, and where can I get one?" Everything rushed back to Anouk. The terrible image of her mistress's bloodless hand, the mad dash through Paris. She pressed her hands to her mouth, not sure if she was about to be sick or about to cry. Cricket waved them in, checked the hallway, and locked the door. The apartment smelled of mint tea and something more pungent, like overripe fruit. It was small, a single room with an unmade bed and a kitchenette with a boiling kettle. A clock in the shape of a black cat sat on the toaster, its circling tail ticking away the seconds. Heavy curtains blocked the windows. Ferns hung from the ceiling. Books were stacked on the side table, and there were dirty clothes strewn around that didn't help with the smell. The music came from a desk by the tall front windows out of twin speakers on either side of a laptop computer that flashed with swirling bright images, casting the entire room in a rainbow of neon colors. Cricket went to the desk and hit a few keys. The music stopped. She threw back the curtains. "Whatever happened, it's bad, isn't it?" she said. Without the music, the black cat clock's ticking filled the room. Anouk's fingers itched to pick up the dirty piles of clothes, to run a sponge over the sticky kitchen counters. To do something normal, something routine. Cricket rested her hands on Anouk's shoulders. "Are you all right?" she asked. Anouk couldn't help it. The tears started before she could stop them. Cricket pulled her into a hug, smelling of mint and something sharper. Coffee, maybe. Her kinky hair tickling Anouk's shoulders. "She's dead," Anouk choked out. Cricket tensed. "I should have known. That's the only way you could be out of the house. What happened? Is Luke back? Did he send you here?" "He's still missing," Anouk said quietly. Cricket's eyes widened. "Oh, merde. Give me the details." Bo turned to Anouk. "Maybe you should go into the bathroom. You don't need to hear this." "I saw it, Bo. I can handle it." He looked at her as though he'd prefer to lock her away somewhere so safe that even unpleasant memories couldn't reach her, but he sighed. "I found Vittoria in her room," he explained quietly. "She was already dead. It was ugly. Blood everywhere. We didn't know what to do. The kettle started whistling." Cricket ran a hand over her face. In the sunlight coming through the windows, her brown skin glowed the color of leaves, of tea leaves. She jerked the screaming kettle off the stove. "Murdered? And you don't know who did it?" Bo shook his head. Cricket took a step forward, her face suddenly fierce. "And our pelts?" "In the car." Relief unwound over her strained face, and Cricket sank into the desk chair. The neon lights on her computer played over her features like something Anouk had read about once. "The lights in the north?" "No, the northern lights." Cricket drew in a long breath. She grabbed a cup and poured herself some tea, hands shaking so badly that water sloshed onto the desk. Anouk quietly wiped away the drops with her dress cuff. Cricket set down the cup. "Good riddance." Anouk gasped. "Cricket?" Cricket gave her a hard look. Her hands were steady now, more characteristic of the thief Anouk knew. She touched the dangling gold earring in her right ear, the only adornment she allowed herself. "You didn't know her like we did. You were her pet, her favorite. It's better that she's dead. If Luke were here, he'd say the same thing. You know he would." Anouk wrung her hands. She went to the windows, looked at the birds on the opposite roof, crows but regular ones. If she could go back in time to the night before, would she warn her mistress? "A flock of scrying crows followed us." When Hunter Black and Vigo find her body, they'll come hunting for us. When did it happen? Cricket asked. Late last night, midnight. Cricket glanced at the black cat clock. Then we have just over 2.5 days. Anouk frowned. For what? To find another master. Cricket leaned forward, tinting her fingers. Luke explained it to me in case something like this ever happened. A witch's soul lasts 3 days after she dies. Once her soul is gone, all her enchantments vanish too. She looked from one to another, as though she wasn't certain they understood. That means if we don't find another witch to perform the spell again, then by Saturday at midnight, we'll turn back into animals, Bo whispered. Anouk flinched. Cricket nodded. It's good that you thought to take the pelts. Beasties' lives are tied to their pelts. If someone burned them, we'd go up in flames. If they were put through the wood chipper, well, she pantomimed being shredded into tiny bits. Bo made a face. And anyway, if we have any hope of staying human, Cricket continued, we'll need those pelts to uphold the spell. We just have to find another witch who can do it fast. Merde, I wish Luke were here. Bo cleared his throat, still looking slightly green. There's the Trafalgar witch. Vittora's called on her for help before. Cricket shook her head. She's in England. We'd be stopped at the border. She blew on her tea. Most witches are out of the question, too far away or too dangerous. Mata Orcel isn't a complete terror. She might help, but she has close ties to the royals. Then we'll need to try something else, Bo said. Not a witch. In the bird market near Sainte-Chapelle, there's a pretty broker who has connections to disgraced royals, an old baroness who still has a bit of magic. No royals, too risky. Well, what do you suggest? That we go to Vigo for help? Cricket shot him a dirty look as she drummed her short nails on the mug. Click, click, click. She let out a loud sigh. You say the pelts are in the car? Bo nodded. Get them. They're safe. No one's going to wood chip them. Are there even wood chippers in Paris? No, it's not that. I need to check something. A rumor. She tapped her foot anxiously. Bo exchanged a look with Anouk, then picked up his keys and headed downstairs. Cricket paced by the window, sipping tea, glancing outside. Anouk folded her hands, fighting the urge to mop up the spots of tea Cricket was spilling on the floor. Cricket dropped down in the seat across from her. Did Bo do it? She whispered, her eyes alight. Anouk nearly choked. Bo? Why would you think that? She felt her cheeks burning. Hadn't she wondered the same thing? Because I'd have done it if I'd known what parts of her were still human enough to bleed. Cricket, did I ever tell you why I don't have fingerprints? She held out her hands. Palms up, the pads nothing but smooth flesh. Everyone thinks she burned them off to make me a better thief, but they're wrong. I made a mistake. Once. I kept something I wasn't supposed to steal for her, a rare book. I stole it from the home of a wealthy pretty, and was almost caught. I had to hide in a closet for hours, so I read the book. It was a story of a girl who got a ticket in the mail for a magic train, a train that would take her everywhere, even to the moon. And for years she just rode it everywhere and saw the world. I loved that book. I wanted it. One thing that was just mine. But she knew, of course, the crows. She took the book and burned it in front of me, page by page, then burned off my fingerprints in their ashes. Anouk had never heard Cricket's story. She looked away. She might have given it to you if you'd asked for it. Cricket snorted. Not likely. And anyway, what did you ever do to earn your ire? She bent over and grabbed Anouk's foot, tugged off the Oxford shoe, and rolled down the sock. She held up Anouk's foot with its 4 toes pointing to the scar. Look at what she did. Look! She cut off your toes on a whim, just so your feet would fit in her shoes. So she could play dress up. You didn't make any mistakes. You didn't steal from her. You didn't disobey her. Cricket's face went grim. She was a monster. Anouk jerked her foot back, quickly rolled up the sock and laced the shoe. Bunny ears, crossed in an X, tied in a bow. Cricket bit her lip. I'm sorry. She took Anouk's hands. Listen, we only have each other now. It's the 4 of us against the world. You, me, Bo, and Luke. No one else understands. No one else loves us. Anouk looked out the window. Anxiously. 5 of us. Cricket's gaze wavered. You mean Hunter Black? You know how he clings to Vigo's shadow? If his loyalty was ever challenged, I wouldn't bet on him siding with us. But he's still one of us. I'm not sure he remembers that. Cricket turned a lock of Anouk's hair tenderly behind her ear. We'll stick together. We'll find Luke. And who knows, maybe we don't need a master at all. Maybe we don't need a witch or a royal. Maybe we could just be human. Guilt crawled up Anouk's neck. If Mata Vitora had ever heard them talk about not needing a master, she'd have had Hunter Black take their tongues. Her eyes drifted to the desk, to the collection of wires and rubber cables and silver ports, electronics. She hadn't a clue what any of them were for. And a notebook, too, with words in no pretty language, and illustrations of hand symbols. They made her feel uneasy, like eyes watching from the shadows. Anouk slid the notebook around. Cricket, these look like they're nothing. Cricket grabbed the notebook. That warm feeling spread on Anouk's neck. She realized where she'd seen those hand symbols. They were gestures Mata Vitora used for a fire trick to extinguish candles. And the writing had been in the Silentium box. Cutting spells and rotting spells and fire tricks. What was Cricket doing studying spells, let alone violent ones, when beasties couldn't do magic? Never mind that, Cricket slammed the notebook closed. She dragged Anouk by the wrist to the kitchenette. That's nothing, try this, you must. I've only just discovered it and it's marvelous. She dug through a glass fishbowl of candy and took out a small paper packet. She poured neon-colored crystals into her palm. Half she tossed in her mouth and half she gave to Anouk. Anouk sniffed, sweet and artificial. She touched one to her tongue. Cherry. And then it suddenly fizzed on her tongue and went pop and she jumped. The pretties call them pop rocks, Cricket said, eyes glinting. The door opened, interrupting them. Bo carried the bag of pelts slung over one shoulder to the dining table. Cricket swept the plates onto the floor, and Bo pulled out the pelts one at a time. A musty smell spread throughout the room. They were all different sizes, some the size of small rugs, the first still matted, others no bigger than dinner plates, and one that fluttered with white feathers. Mata Vitor hadn't bothered to wash the creatures before she peeled off their fur or feathers or scales and made them human. Anouk turned away, feeling sick. She went to the window and focused on the fresh air. Cricket had a dying mint plant on the ledge, and she broke off a few leaves, chewed on one anxiously, hoping it would soothe her stomach, and stuffed the rest in her pocket. Cricket pawed through the pelts almost hungrily. The one on top, large, with chocolate-brown fur. Below it, a tiny one with gray fur and a ropey. Bald pink tail. The one with gray and white feathers, larger than Anouk had thought at first. Looks like a dog, Cricket said, and a mouse. And what's this one, a swan? Cricket rattled out creatures like she was reading from a magazine. Which had been Anouk's? She watched out of the corner of her eye as Cricket examined them one by one. She didn't feel drawn to any. None of them pulled at her stomach. She had no fierce pangs of recognition. She felt something more like revulsion. She had once been one of these things. An owl, I think, Bo said. What exactly are you looking for? He too stood back from the pile of fur and feathers as though they made him fearful. Luke had a theory. Cricket ran her hand over the owl's feathered pelt and then tossed it aside. That maybe Mata Vitora didn't use only domesticated animals. Anouk looked up sharply. What else would she have used? Her teasing with Bo came back to her, but he was half monkey and she 3/4 dust bunny. Cricket inspected the next pelt. It was the size of a small sweater with an angel's soft white fur like cashmere. This one's a cat, I think. Anyway, Luke wasn't certain. It was something he'd overheard Big O saying to one of the royals. Big O was there since the beginning, you know. He was 12 when Luke was made. And then me and Hunter Black, and the two of you. He saw it all happen. And he said that one of us was a... She reached the last pelt and stopped. A different smell permeated the room, more earthy like the samples of moss in the townhouse's solarium. Bo eyed the pelt on the table cautiously. Cricket slowly reached out a hand and touched it. Anouk stepped forward, her breath coming in odd bursts. This last pelt was different from the others. Not a dog, a mouse, a cat, or an owl. It was much larger, bigger even than the dog's, and the fur was gray and wiry, too thick, too heavy, too dark. Luke was right, Cricket breathed. One of us is a wolf. Chapter 9. Anouk's fingers sank into the thick pelt while the others argued. That's impossible, Bo said. Where did Mata Vitora find a wolf in Paris? I don't know, the zoo. She was a witch. She could have walked through the portal elevator in Castle Ide straight into the Black Forest and trapped one there. So what does that mean, one of us is a wolf? What's a wolf if not a traitor? You know what Mata Vitora used to say about wolves. Wolves in the wood together are good. Wolf on its own expect blood and bone. It means we can't trust one of us. Yes, but which one? Anouk said. Bo and Cricket looked at her as though they'd almost forgotten she was there. Well, it's Hunter Black, of course, Cricket said. Isn't it obvious? But Anouk kept eyeing the different pelts uneasily. It was impossible to tell. None had Bo's tan skin or Cricket's curly hair. Any of the pelts could have belonged to any of them. I guess so, Anouk said. But it didn't feel right. Hunter Black was decidedly detached, yes, the very picture of a lone wolf. Except for his fierce devotion to Biggo. Wasn't that more like a loyal hound clinging to his master's heels? Then her eyes fell on the burlap sack on the ground. Bo? Her head started to feel too light. Where did you get that bag? He toed it with his shoe. It was in the mistress's closet. She approached the sack warily. On the floor or on the shelf? I don't know, the shelf, I guess. Why? Isn't it the same one we used to catch the corpus crows? Anouk shook her head. No, it's not just any bag. She crouched down and touched the sack slowly as though it might bite. She would have recognized its almost imperceptible shimmer when Bo had first grabbed it to carry the pelts. She'd been unable to think about anything other than Mata Vitora. The minute her hand grazed the fabric it changed and she jerked her fingers back. It shrunk and folded in on itself, burlap darkening and growing glossy and smooth, silver buckles pushing out from the seams, a snaking black leather strap slithering from the opening. A beautiful, perfect Hermes purse. It's her obelete. Bo jumped backward and almost knocked over a chair. That's it? You're certain? It shimmers regardless of its form, if you know how to look at it. Cricket reached out for it, but Anouk held it back protectively. Come on, Cricket urged. There could be all kinds of things in there we need. Money, gold, spells we could trade for. It isn't that simple. Anouk opened the bag and turned it upside down. Nothing came out. Cricket's face fell. It's empty? That's impossible. Bo grabbed the bag and pawed through the space. Anouk took the bag back from him. It isn't empty, but its contents are protected. We'll need a witch to truly open it. Something outside caught Anouk's ear. A certain familiar rev of an engine. She went to the window. The sun was rising above the tall buildings, casting the city in bright, clear morning light. The rev came again. A motorcycle pulled up in front of the apartment. The motorcycle pulled up in front of the apartment, and the driver shut off its engine. The gunmetal color winked in the sunlight. Two figures were winked. Two figures were on the back, helmets shading their faces, but Anouk didn't need to see their faces, only Hunter Black's coat. She spun away from the window. Bo swore as he looked down to Hunter Black's motorcycle. We have to run. Where? Anouk said. We're 5 stories up and there's only one staircase. She went to the door and pressed her ear against its peeling paint. The other residents were up and about now. She heard the canned sound of the radio and the clatter of pans. The downstairs neighbor must be making breakfast. And then footsteps on the stairs. 2 sets. She recoiled from the door. They're coming. Her hand went to her necklace, needing the soothing touch of Luke's coin, but finding nothing, just skin and bone, and an empty chain. Gone. In the bottom of the fountain. She dropped her hand. We have to hide. Are you mad? Said Cricket. Hunter Black was literally made for this, to hunt. They'll find you in seconds. but Anouk was already searching the room for possible hiding places. She and Bo and Luke had played hide and seek whenever Mata was away, and they'd had the full run of the townhouse. A place where entire ballrooms were hidden within closets, staircases led to floors that shouldn't exist, cupboards opened to secret tunnels. But Cricket's apartment was tiny and sparsely furnished, and not magic in the slightest, leaving only a handful of options under the bed. Beneath the kitchen sink, in the closet. She's right, we don't have any other choice. Bo threw back the shower curtain, eyed the tub. I parked the Rolls Royce around the corner, and they didn't see us come in, so they might not know that we're here. Footsteps thundered up the stairs, one flight down now. Zoot! Cricket started to throw the scattered pelts into a pile on the floor. We have to hide these too. Help me. The musty smell of pelts and stomp, stomp, stomp of approaching boots made Anouk light-headed. The closet. It's the only place big enough. The three of them dragged the pelts to the closet and threw them over the messy piles of clothes just as the footsteps stopped short on the landing. Someone knocked. Hard. Quick, get in, Cricket whispered, herding Bo and Anouk toward the closet. The omelette, where is it? Bo hissed. If Vigo sees it, he'll recognize it. Anouk scanned the room. There, beneath the table. She snatched it up just as Vigo jiggled the knob from the outside, trying to force his way in. Bo threw himself headfirst into the forest of Cricket's clothes, sending the coat hangers clattering, and Anouk tumbled in after him. Cricket! Vigo yelled. Open the door! Anouk fell against the coats and towels and the musty pelts that sent up a scratchy cloud of dust and made her eyes water. She stifled a cough as Bo eased the door closed. Darkness. She heard the little puffs of her own breathing, clothes rustling as Bo moved closer, pounding again on the front door. Let us in, Cricket, now! Cricket hit the music again. The low beats blared, pulsing in time with the thumping of Anouk's heart. She pushed a dress out of her face. Her eyes were starting to adjust. The closet door was made of thick, frosted glass, the kind it was easier to see out of than into. She could just make out Cricket's blurry figure crossing the room. She heard the lock slide open and the clatter of a chain. What the H are you two doing here? Cricket demanded. It isn't even 10 o'clock in the morning. Anouk pretended she was made of stone, trying not to move an inch. A belt was swinging from a nail, clanking softly, and she cringed and prayed for it to stop. You changed your locks, Vigo accused. Anouk could partially make him out through the frosted glass. His unmistakable slouch and fair mussed hair. He raised his hand, jingling his set of keys. This apartment isn't yours, it's mine. You can't keep me out. What do you want? Cricket spat. Are you alone? Vigo was leaning close to Cricket, nearly pitting her against the kitchenette sink, while Hunter Black's dark shape sat prowling round the room. Of course, who else would be here? I thought you were supposed to be out of town. A mission en Dordogne. Yeah, well, I wasn't I? Just got in a few hours ago. The music increased a few notches in volume. Cricket must have hit the controls again. Maybe she'd heard the clank from the closet. Why? What's this about? Vigo didn't answer right away. Anouk kept her eyes on Hunter Black's shape, moving beyond the frosted glass like some underwater monster as he stalked over to the bathroom. She heard the bathroom door open. The clatter of 10 rings as he drew the shower curtain back. Bo's hand found hers in the darkness. His fingers squeezed hers protectively. Hey, Cricket called. Tell your trained monkey to keep his hands off my stuff. What does he think he's going to find under that bed? His missing coolies? It was just a matter of time before Hunter Black looked in the closet. The smell of their pelts was nearly choking. Anouk squeezed Bo's hand back. Cricket was right. They had to look out for one another. No one else would. Vigo said something too low for Anouk to hear, but Cricket answered sharply. Bo and Anouk? No, Bo hasn't been by in weeks, and Anouk? I didn't think that little bird was allowed to leave her cage. She paused. Why? What happened? Is it Mata Anouk tried to ignore the memory of blood on her hands, wiped clean now, though a little was caught under her fingernails. She's fine, Vigo answered. His voice drifted to a higher octave. He'd always been a bad liar. In fact, she wants to see you. Tonight, she's summoning all four of you to the townhouse for a meeting, no exceptions. He tapped her computer and the music stopped. It was quiet, too quiet. Anouk could practically hear her heart beating. And Luke? Cricket asked sharply. Where's Luke? I haven't heard from him in days. We don't know where he is, Hunter Black said. No one does. His hand went to his neck, where just last week Luke had had to give him stitches. If Hunter Black had an affinity for any of the other beasties, and Anouk wasn't convinced that he did, it would be for the boy who sewed his wounds and never breathed a word about it. Vigo shot him a nasty look, like he'd revealed too much. Don't worry about Luke, Vigo purred, turning back to Cricket. Pack a bag. You'll need to stay at the townhouse for a few days, maybe longer. Things are about to get dangerous in the city. There's soon to be changes within the Hote. You'll need my protection. He took his time putting his hands all over her things, her teapot and candy bowl, and the black cat clock and bright yellow headphones. You're so alone out here. What's it been, 4 years? Not a lot of time to learn how the world works. He slowly wound the headphone cords around his palm. All I ever wanted was for you to be safe. They were too far from the closet for Anouk to make out much. Blurry movement of Vigo setting down his headphones and reaching for Cricket's shoulders. Get your fingers off me, Cricket hissed. You're beautiful when you're angry like this, love. Anouk squeezed her eyes closed. She hated seeing this, hated the feel of Hunter Black prowling around, his footsteps so calculated and slow, and hated that possessive note in Vigo's voice. Love? No, what she was listening to wasn't love. Vigo wasn't capable of loving anything as far as she had seen. Not even his own mother. He must have gone to the townhouse, must have seen Mata's body. And yet here he was, pawing at Cricket while his mother's blood emptied into the Persian rug. He was probably already planning how he could take over her empire. If Anouk had to guess, that was what this supposed meeting was about. Hunter Black's shadow moved away from the bed. He turned toward the closet. Beau's hand squeezed hers hard, as though he feared being ripped apart. Chapter 10. Anouk pressed one hand against her mouth, clutched Beau's hand with the other. Hunter Black was just on the other side of the door. It was so stiflingly hot in the closet, the musty pelts choked her, fur and particles, their old life, catching in her nose. She couldn't breathe, but then Beau's fingers intertwined with her own. She could hear his breathing, slower than her own, and more steady. He inched over the pile of pelts to wrap his arm around her back. He didn't dare speak. She leaned her head against his chest. I don't need your protection, Cricket's voice in the living room was strained. I am not yours. I never will be. For Vigo's whole life, his mother had showered him with gifts from both the hot and the pretty world. Fast cars, expensive clothes, tickets to secret places only magic could access. He'd never been denied anything. Hunter Black's shadow fell over the frosted glass. Anouk clutched Beau harder, wanting to shelter them both. Keep us safe, she wished. Like a coin tossed in a fountain. Like magic. She closed her eyes, barely knowing what she was doing. How many times had she been dusting the house and overheard Mata Vittora do a simple diversion whisper, enough that she could recite the Silentium Vox words in her sleep. Omni terra das royal oscura, omni figuras das vicine etan absconcia, she whispered, lips moving quickly. The taste of mint was still fresh on her tongue. She felt Beau twist to look at her, but she didn't open her eyes. She knew beasties couldn't do magic, but neither could pretties. And look how beautiful their world was. Look at all the things they had built, the roundabouts and the cafes and glittering department stores. What was that if not magic? Voc voc eta commandet summa suspirias, she whispered faster. Non avis no. She heard Hunter Black's hand on the closet doorknob, and then the metal clicking softly as it twisted. The door opened a crack. She felt a terrible rush of air on her face, the smell of Cricket's tea, the murmur of Vigo whispering declarations of love to Cricket by the sink. Non avis nos sparrow. She didn't stop whispering the words. Don't see us. Don't see us, please. The door stayed like that, open a crack, and then just in the moment when she knew Hunter Black would find them, a sharp smack came from the kitchenette. Cricket had slapped Vigo. Anouk's eyes flew open. Hunter Black was across the room in 3 strides to defend his master. The closet door shut, the frosted glass rattling softly. Closed. Anouk stared at the knob in disbelief. Hurt him again, Hunter Black snarled, and I'll put you in your grave. No, Vigo's voice was sharp. Don't threaten her. Cricket spat out. I'll be there tonight. Just get out of here. Just go. Vigo started pacing. He raked his fingers through his flaxen hair. Did you find anything, Hunter Black? They aren't here. Not here? Wasn't he going to check the closet? Anouk felt Bo stiffen by her side, as confused as she was. He mimicked the gesture of the slap and shrugged as if to suggest the altercation must have distracted Hunter Black. It was true, Hunter Black always went a little wild at the idea of his master being hurt, but still, he was a hunter like his name. He didn't get distracted. Anouk pressed her fingertips to her lips. She was shaking. It couldn't be the magic, could it? Her whisper? It had only been a desperate try. She hadn't expected it to work. Tonight, then, Vigo said, at the townhouse. And if either of those little beasties comes crawling to you, you drag them along with you, you understand? Or there will be consequences. Heavy footsteps thumped away, followed by the slamming door. She heard Cricket fasten the chain lock and mutter something unrepeatable. Had they really not been found? The closet door flew open. Cricket stood in the doorway. We've got to get out of Paris, far away from those dangerous lunatics. Put as much distance as we can between us and them before tonight comes, and we don't show up at whatever deranged trap he has set for us at the townhouse. She looked at Anouk strangely. You must be the luckiest 2 people alive for him not to have found you in there. The fountain, Anouk stuttered, feeling the blood hot in her face, her hands starting to shake now that the danger had passed and it was sinking in, how close they'd been to getting caught. And the alley at the end of Rue d'Amance, the little gargoyle. I dropped a coin in the water and made a wish for us to be safe. Maybe it worked. Cricket scoffed. That's just a legend. The muscles of Anouk's arms were twitching now, and she couldn't seem to make them stop. I also cast one of Madavatore's diversion whispers. Everyone went quiet. A car drove by, honking, and a baby wailed from the apartment overhead. That's impossible, Bo said at last. Even if you know the whisper's words, it takes a magic handler to cast spells. He rubbed his chin for a long time. It had to have been a coincidence. You saw how he leapt to defend Vigo. His mind was elsewhere. Anouk expected Cricket to chastise her more. Cricket, who was practical and ironic, who believed in the power of knives, not whispers, but Cricket was oddly quiet. Her long fingers drummed against the desk, rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat, as the swirling colors of her computer screen threw rainbows over her features. She leaned forward, hands tinted together. Do you really think you worked magic just now, Anouk? Something about Cricket's firm gaze threw her. I don't know, she said honestly. Bo looked from one to the other with a scrunched-up face. Are you 2 seriously considering this? Silently, Cricket slid her desk drawer open and set out the candle and matches and journal that she'd hidden when they first arrived. She'd struck a match with a sizzle of smoke and lit the wick. She gestured to everything, chewing on her fingernail. All of this, the drawings in the notebook, too. I've been trying to do magic on my own. Not just any magic, dark spells. Anouk searched her face. Can you? No, Cricket dropped her hand. Not yet, at least. But I know this sounds crazy. I can feel it. I can feel that it's possible. Bo scratched his chin, eyeing the flickering candle warily. Cricket pointed to it. It's a fire trick, extinguishing the flame with whispers alone. I'd rather start a fire, but I can't find that spell. She gestured to the computer. I found this one on the internet. Anouk had heard Vigo talking about the internet. It had to do with technology of the pretty world. But unlike electric lights, which always turned on, and cars which could be relied on to go forward, the internet was tricky. Hard to tell what was lies and what wasn't. Try it, Anouk, Cricket urged. I've barely mastered 3 words, and you fluent in the Silentium box. No, I'm not. I've only read some of the books, she quickly corrected, but she did know the spell, even without looking at the words in Cricket's notebook. Mata had cast it so often that Anouk could have whispered it in her sleep. She watched the flame steadily, thought about the light going out, and it spurred a warmth in her body. Her pulse increased. The words took shape in her mouth. Dorflemos, she murmured so softly the others leaned forward, uncertain she'd spoken at all. The flame flickered, just for a second, and then strengthened again. See, Cricket cried. It worked. Well, sort of. Bo raised a doubtful eyebrow. The window is open, you know. Breeze or not, it doesn't matter, Anouk interjected. It wouldn't have truly worked unless I'd consumed some life essence. Cricket blew out the candle and dropped it back in the drawer. Her gaze was both defiant and hopeful at the same time. I'm not saying I'm the next great witch of Paris, or that you are, or any of us. I'm just saying that it's been on my mind. She jerked her head toward the window. As much as we look like the pretties out there, we aren't them. We've more in common with the goblins. We were born of magic too, weren't we? Just like the rest of the Hote? So why shouldn't we be able to cast a whisper? Why shouldn't we learn to give those royals and witches a taste of their own medicine, cut off their toes, burn off their fingerprints? It's dangerous. The Vitae echo. Cricket paced, stretching and flexing her long fingers. I know the limits of the Hote, but imagine if we could do even a fraction of what they can. We could stop them from keeping all of us under their thumbs. You've spent more time with Mata than the rest of us combined, Anouk. You know all her tricks and whispers. If you could work them, you'd be as strong as any witch. No one would ever enslave you again, or any of us. Anouk looked down at her hands. Torn, broken nails, short fingers that didn't look suited to do anything but hold them up. If that was true, Bo said, then it would mean Mata had been lying to us our whole lives. Cricket gave him a hard look. Sounds like her, doesn't it? Bo conceded with a nod. Anouk kept her eyes on the snaking smoke that even with the candle put away didn't quite dissipate. So what do we do? Cricket grabbed her keys and a wad of crumpled bills from a jar on the desk. She pulled on her jacket, shoved a stick of gum in her mouth. We get the H out of Paris. She took a knife from the kitchen and wrapped the blade in a towel. She held it out to Anouk. Take this. I've seen you in the kitchen. Your skills would give even Hunter Black pause. Never mind that the only things you've ever stabbed are vegetables. Hesitantly, Anouk took it. It was a chef's knife, heavy and solid. The wooden handle nestled in her palm as though it had been molded to fit there. She wrapped her fingers around it and wondered, with a sudden lurch of her pulse, if slicing flesh felt like piercing an eggplant. Cricket grunted her approval. Now let's go find someone who will tell us the truth. Where? Bo asked. Anouk spoke first, surprising all of them. Montelimar. Chapter 11. Both Cricket and Bo were very silent until Cricket leaned over the sink and spat out her gum. I'm sorry, she said, but have you gone insane? Montelimar is where the Lavender Witch lives, Bo said. Mata Zola. Anouk thrust her hand in her jacket pocket, rolled the rough sprig of mint between her fingers. I know. Mata Zola is our enemy, Cricket enunciated as though Anouk had suddenly gone deaf. Mata hated her, and the feeling was mutual. Because of their feud, Zola lost all her holdings in central France. She's banished out there to her wilted garden, left to rot like a sack of winter potatoes, forbidden to have anything to do with the Hote. She reached for another stick of gum as though she needed something to calm her nerves. Maybe that's a good thing, Anouk argued. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? If we can convince the Lavender Witch that we served Vitora only because we were enchanted, she might help us. Neither Cricket nor Bo appeared convinced. Anouk rested her hands on the table. Before Luke disappeared, he started spending more time on the scribeboard. Yesterday afternoon, I went through his log. He'd been spying on Mata Even contacted her for help, though it didn't look as though he ever got a response. Bo raised his eyebrows. Did Mata Vittora know about this? Anouk shook her head. Why would Luke want another witch's help? Cricket said. Help with what? I don't know, but whatever his aim, he thought he could trust Matazola, and I trust him. We should go to Montelamar, unless you know a good reason not to. Just one? We have every reason not to go. Cricket counted off on her fingers. 1. As far as Montezola is concerned, we've always been loyal servants for the witch who orchestrated her downfall. 2. Word was probably reached her that we've potential witch murderers, which I doubt will reassure her when we show up at her door. 3. Even if she does extend the spell, we'll just be trading one mistress for another, which brings me to 4. Have you heard the rumors about what she does to goblins? And 5. Montelamar is more than halfway across the country. That's what, Bo? 6 hours from here? 7. See, it's almost noon, which means we have only 2.5 days left to find a way out of this. We can't spend 7 of our last hours on a tour of the countryside. She shook her head. No, we stay in Paris and go to the bird market broker. Anouk turned to Bo for help. We need a witch, not some pretty broker. Luke contacted Zola for a reason. Bo relented. If Luke trusted her, then it might be worth the risk. I say Montelamar. Sorry, Cricket. You're outvoted. Zola is dangerous, Cricket insisted. I don't doubt it. He glanced at the black cat clock ticking away on Cricket's toaster. Her estate is called the Chateau de Mille Fleurs, the House of 1,000 Flowers. I drove Mata Vittora there last winter. We could make it before sundown. If we go there and it looks too dangerous, we leave. Come back to Paris and go to the bird market broker. We'd still have about, he quickly counted, 45 hours. Cricket didn't answer. She chewed her gum anxiously and then, grumbling, grabbed a backpack and started stuffing things into it. The yellow headphones, a handful of candy, the cat clock. She slung the backpack over her shoulder and rooted around in a pile of coats by the front door until she found 3 umbrellas, 2 of which she tossed to them, saying, Fine, but take these. It isn't raining, Anouk said. It isn't for that. It's for the crows. To get us from here to the car without them seeing us. Cricket didn't bother to lock her door, though she did give room for one final look. Tiny as it was, the apartment was as much freedom as Cricket had ever had in her short life. Cricket turned away sharply, and they descended the stairs into the foyer that smelled stronger now, like curried fish. Cricket peered through the peephole. It looks clear, no motorcycles or idiots in slouchy hats. She rested her hand on the doorknob, eyes wide, umbrellas up. Remember, we're in this together. She shoved open the door, and they were awash in daylight. Anouk took shelter beneath her umbrella, ignoring the pretties in the sunny street who gave their umbrellas odd glances. They rushed to the car, Anouk's heart slipping and sliding around in her chest. She kept expecting to hear the roar of Hunter Black's motorcycle, the flapping of wings. She dared to peek toward the skies and saw hundreds of dark outlines circling overhead. She dived into the passenger seat and slammed the door. The crows are everywhere. Cricket was already in the back seat. The crows aren't our real enemy. She dug around in the backpack until she pulled out the black cat clock. This is time. She spat her gum into her hand, mushed it on the clock's base, and then leaned forward between the front seats and affixed it to the dashboard. Tick, tick, tick. Bo climbed in and shot the black cat clock a doubting look, but said nothing as he drew the car into drive, then whipped them through the maze of narrow lanes in the Latin Quarter into the Marais. Eventually, tall buildings bled into the countryside, vast fields of dying grass dotted with sheep, villages that clustered together as though for warmth. A train barreled past them in the other direction, and Anouk smoothed her face against the window and watched it grow smaller until it was gone. So what exactly do we know about Matazola? Bo asked. What's to know? Cricket leaned forward between the seats. She's a witch like all the rest. She'll have a house full of servants, an insufferable brat for a witch's boy, and skin stretched too tight over creaky old bones. If we're lucky, maybe she won't do to us what she did to the goblins. What did she do to the goblins? Bo asked, though he sounded as though he dreaded the answer. Goblins are an old order, but an unambitious one. They'd be content living their quiet, bizarre little lives, and never amassing an ounce of power. It was easy for witches to exploit them. Last summer there was an ugly rumor going around that Zola lured the goblins to her estate with the promise of fantastic tea parties, But the ones who attended kept disappearing, and the ones who went looking for them disappeared. Speculation started that she'd been poisoning their tea and burying their bodies in their flower beds. She thought her lavender grew bitter in blood, more potent, for her tricks and whispers. Bo looked sideways at Anouk. This is where you want us to go? An estate with chopped up goblins mixed in with the potting soil? It's only a rumor, Anouk offered, though her toes had curled tightly in their shoes. Cricket snorted. You still have that knife I gave you, right, Anouk? Anouk took it out of the jacket and unwound the towel, wincing at the glimpse of her reflection in the blade. Sunken eyes, messy hair. Matavitora would have had a fit. The thought triggered the memory of blood on her mistress's cream-colored blouse, and Anouk leaned forward, head between her knees. Cricket rubbed her gently on the back. It'll be okay, she said, mistaking Anouk's reaction. I've got my knives, too, and Bo can fight. And hang on, Bo interjected. Me? Fight? You train with Vigo all the time. Yeah, it's his punching bag. Cricket dismissed this with a wave. You know how to fight, even if you're usually on the receiving end. This might be your chance to actually throw the punches. Let's hope not, Bo said. Let's hope rumors are just rumors, and when we get to Montelamar, we won't need knives or fists or anything else that could get us killed. Anouk sat up. Cricket squeezed her shoulder in reassurance and then started through the blades she had hidden in the folds of her clothing, testing the sharpness of each one. On the dashboard, the black cat clock kept ticking and the tail moving in quick little stabs. Anouk hoped she'd done the right thing in convincing them to come. Why hadn't Luke told her about trying to contact Matazola? Anouk wasn't used to having guessed his logic. She'd always simply trusted him, and he'd never let her down. Even Cricket, normally so bold, was chewing her gum anxiously. Luke and Cricket had been around longer than Anouk and Bo and Hunter Black, and from what Anouk had gathered, Matavitora had been especially severe with them. She'd let 13-year-old Vigo use Cricket as a guinea pig during his phase experimenting with mild poisons until Luke volunteered to take her place. And she'd done worse things. No one ever spoke of it outright, but she'd heard rumors about Matavitora long ago forcing Luke into dark tasks that had nothing to do with gardening, late-night massages, having him bring her midnight drinks in bed, and not letting him leave until morning. Tasks that she hadn't tried forcing on any of the others. Luke had taken the brunt of the abuse to spare the rest of them. We need to stop for gas, Bo said somewhere near Lyon, breaking the silence. Cricket grabbed a folded map from the seat pocket and wrestled it into submission, then traced her finger along the auto route. There's a village called Saint-Deseret ahead. It's tiny, too small for any scrying crows, you think? I hope, Bo mumbled. I don't feel like having my eyes plucked out today. Someone's stomach growled. Someone else's answered. Maybe there will be a cafe, too, Cricket continued. I mean, we can't very well show up at Matazola's asking for her to save our lives and cook us lunch. They followed signs to a single-lane road that wound in lazy switchbacks up a hill past small cottages and vineyards. The narrow road changed to cobblestone as it took them to a mismatch of clustered buildings perched close together. A young man swept the steps of a whitewashed building whose sign indicated it was a cafe. Bo pulled up to a gas station and checked the sky. It looks clear. Go on to the cafe and order. Anouk, you'll be safe with Cricket. I'll get the gas and meet you there. Keep your eyes open. If anything looks off, leave your pastries and run for the car. Hey now, no one's desperate enough to abandon pastries, Cricket said. Not yet. Anouk climbed out, thrusting her hands into her jacket pockets. Her fingers worked anxiously at the mint. Were those two women with a stroller staring at her? Had she missed a spot of blood on her skin? She couldn't shake the feeling that the pretty since the three of them didn't belong. Cricket slid on sunglasses and glanced at Anouk. Got any cash? Anouk shook her head. No problem, I got this. It was a narrow sidewalk, and Cricket swerved to avoid a parking meter, bumping into one of the mothers with a stroller. She made a quick apology and walked faster. Once they were a block away, she pulled the woman's wallet from inside her jacket, took out a handful of cash, then dumped the empty wallet in a potted bush as they walked up to the cafe. Cricket grabbed a couple of menus and they picked a table on the patio, half hidden by wisteria vines. Cricket snapped her fingers at the waiter, a young man with a gold eyeliner and a broken heart tattoo on the back of his hand, another pretty taken with goblin fashion. Beignets for me, and coffee for both of us. Anouk? Nothing, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I can eat. A crow landed on the patio railing, small, inquisitive, just a regular crow, but on instinct Anouk cringed, and at the same time the oddly dressed waiter flung a plate at it with such unexpected vehemence that she gave him a closer look, perplexed. The plate shattered in the bushes, and the crow took flight. The waiter straightened his bow tie and offered no explanation. Beau appeared on the patio, wiping his hands on his pants, and slid into the next seat next to Anouk. The waiter smiled. Monsieur? A crepe. Wait, make it 2, 3, okay, 4. You should order something too, Anouk, Cricket insisted. Order everything. We might as well enjoy what we can while we can. Don't be bleak, Boo said. I'm sure everything will be fine. He gave Anouk's hand a reassuring squeeze, but she didn't feel reassured. She took her hand back and reached for a napkin. It's realistic. We have to be honest with ourselves. Cricket lowered her voice. What happens if Matazola can't help us or won't? Then we'll only have 2 days left as we are. To drive, to wear clothes, to eat pastries. After that, well, you know what it was like. Her face soured at the thought, but then she pushed the menu toward Anouk tenderly. I'm just saying that if there's anything you've ever wanted to say or do, then you'd better say it or do it soon, because we might not have much time left. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Anouk realized she'd torn the paper napkin into shreds. When the waiter came back, she ordered a chocolate croissant. It came, flaky and buttery and delicious, and something tugged in her chest. NASCAR, Beau coughed. Are you choking on your crepe? Cricket asked. No, it's a car race in America. That's my dream, to drive in it. He spread jam on his crepe, thinking, and watch a movie in the cinema. There are so many things I haven't done. Ride a train through every country in the world, Cricket said. That's what I'd do. Seen the northern lights, Anouk added. Get a tattoo. Oh, go to a drive-in theater, movies and cars. Sing karaoke. Eat pasta in Italy. Run through a sprinkler. Win at Clue. Eat sausage in Germany. Kiss a boy. Kiss a girl. For a few minutes there was only the sound of clinking plates, of scraping forks and anxious chewing as they all thought of what they'd lose if the worst happened. Anouk wasn't ready for it to end, the beautiful dream of being human. She wanted to experience everything, see all the places she had only read about, sail on a boat, fly in an airplane, and read everything. Fairy tales, romance novels, only humans could write. Such pain and love could make her swoon 1 minute and cry the next over something that had never really happened to people who never really existed. We should go, Beau said. Cricket scooped up the rest of the vignettes and stuffed them in her mini pockets. Anouk almost hated to get back into the car and face the ticking cat clock whose second-hand tail kept turning and turning, always in the direction she didn't want it to move. As they pulled back onto the auto route, the nerves crept back into her insides. She wished she hadn't put so much rich cream in her coffee, somewhere around Plan de Bay. She twisted to look back in the back seat. Cricket had lain down and was caught in the throes of anxious sleep. Beau cleared his throat. She's asleep? Yes. He kneaded the steering wheel with his hands, glancing in the rearview mirror to make sure she was out. So remember what we said at the cafe about us not having much time left to say things we've always wanted to say? His fingers wrapped hard around the steering wheel. I have something I want to say. I don't know if I'll get another chance. He dared a glance at her. She shoved her hands in her pockets and suddenly felt a little too warm. You know it drives me crazy when you say I'm like a brother, right? She nodded. She worked the sprig of mint between her fingers, shredding it into ribbons. She felt the same light, ticklish feeling she had the night when they danced together in the kitchen, the soap bubbles popping on the floor. Such a wonderful moment, and yet at any second they might have tumbled and fallen on their backsides. I never felt we were siblings. In fact, mon Dieu, this is hard. He paused, chewing on his bottom lip, not taking his eyes off the road. He was driving faster now, though he didn't seem to realize it. It's like in Luke's fairy tales. The one about the peasant boy who's hopelessly in love with a princess, and there's that monster he has to stab between the horns. Only the monster's made of a stronger material than his spear, and I forget the rest. The monster is really his changeling brother, I think. His rambling drew to a close, and he glanced at her. Say something, Cabbage. I'm still confused about the monster. Merde! The monster doesn't have anything to do with it. I'm talking about the peasant boy. I'm that boy, and you're the princess. So many thoughts were tumbling around her mind, giving her a topsy-turvy feeling that was both pleasant and unpleasant at the same time. Her face felt very warm now. She redirected the vents to blow cool air on her. Cabbage? Do you understand? The speedometer creaked up to 140 kilometers an hour. I'm just saying, since we might have only a few days left. He gripped the wheel harder. Merde! He veered sharply at a sign indicating they were on the outskirts of Montelimar. The tires squealed as he pulled off the road. Cricket woke with a start. He slammed on the brakes. They sat on a gravel drive of the auto route that just ahead was blocked by an overgrown hedge. There was no wooden fence, no iron bars, only a 10-foot high tangle of shrubs that extended in either direction as far as Anouk could see. "Is this it?" Cricket said in a hushed voice. "This is it," Bo answered gravely. "Last chance to turn around. You're certain about this, Anouk?" The clock kept turning in that endless circle, tick by tick by tick by tick. Anouk brushed a hand at her throat until she found her gold chain necklace. Certain? She'd never been less certain of anything in her life. "I'm sure." The three of them stared at the green wall. On the other side of the densely woven branches would be the ancient and imposing Chateau de Mille Fleurs, the Fortress of Flowers, the Montelimar prison of the second most powerful witch in France. Well, now the first. "What were you reaching out here for, Luke?" Anouk asked silently. "What did you hope to find?" "When we get in there," Cricket muttered from the back seat, "no one drink the tea. We don't want to end up like the goblins." Okay, I'm putting a bookmark at chapter 12. And I will be right back. Oh, it's Everyone Afraid to Be Forgotten. It's a shirt that is meant to advertise the Yonali album and film. I'll be right back. I had to eat. So I had a sandwich. And I should stand up again. Chapter 12. 2 days and 5 hours of enchantment remain. Anouk rolled down her window and was immediately overcome by the scent of lavender, with its delicate notes of camphor and pine. Luke was always saying lavender had a calming effect, but she didn't feel calmer in the slightest. Cricket leaned between the front seats, chewing a fresh stick of gum, staring up at the hedge wall. So how do we get in? Bo regarded the hedge as though at any moment branches with woody fingers would reach out and grab the silver hood ornament. When I came here before, Mata Vitora had me leave her at the gate and wait in town for her signal to pick her up. I can't imagine she climbed the hedges in the heels she always wore. There must be some trick to get through. He patted the steering wheel fondly. Besides, we can't leave the car. We might need to get away fast. Cricket opened the door. Well, we didn't come all this way to get stopped by shrubbery. She climbed out, and Anouk and Bo followed, leaving their doors open, the engine still running just in case. The hedge extended in either direction, broken only by weeds and small copse of stunted cork trees near the side of the road. The three approached the hedge as one might a sleeping bear. No sudden movements, expecting the worst and ready to run. Anouk, stay back. Bo dug out one of the umbrellas from the car and poked at the closest branch with the pointy end. When nothing attacked him, he grabbed a branch and tried to pry it back, but it didn't budge. A dragonfly fluttered past Anouk's face, gossamer wings tickling her cheek. She waved it away and watched it fly in lacy circles toward a small rusted metal box, half hidden by overgrown weeds. Hey, she said, look! She tromped through the scratchy weeds and pushed them away for the box. It looked like the antique brass call box she'd seen on neighboring townhouses, though this one was long neglected. Cricket stomped over, swatting away gnats, and frowned at the box. That's pretty technology, she said. It isn't of the Hote. Well, we might as well try it, Bo said. We aren't getting past those hedges, that's for sure. He bent to inspect the ornate brass scrollwork. What do we do? I'm no expert, but I'm guessing we push that button that says push. Wow, thanks, Cricket. I meant, what are we supposed to say if someone answers? They won't let us in if we tell them we're fugitives suspected of murder. So say it's a delivery. Witches don't get deliveries. How does she get toilet paper then, genius? She's imprisoned here by decree of the royals. Cricket shoved him, and he shoved her back. Exasperated, Anouk couldn't think about anything but the tick-tick-tick of the black cat clock. She pushed her way between the two of them, stabbed her thumb against the intercom button, and rattled out with barely a breath, Hello, my name is Anouk. I don't have a last name. I guess if I did, it would be Vitora. That's who made me. Made us, I mean. The three of us, and we need... There are three of us, and we need your help because our mistress is dead, and we don't have much time. We're desperate. She let go of the button. Bo and Cricket had stopped fighting. The intercom was silent. Anouk stared at it, chewing her lip. I thought we should be honest, she said to them by way of explanation, but now that felt foolish. This is wrong, Bo blurted out. Although the sun was setting, he was sweating badly, slapping at nuts. I don't like the feel of this place. If we do ever find our way in there, we might never find our way back out. We should leave while we still can. He tried to herd Anouk back to the car, but she shook her head. Just wait. She stared at the intercom, willing someone to answer. She'd convinced them to come here to spend precious hours on the drive. If they were turned away, where else would they go? Laughter, a little husky and a lot amused, came from the copse of trees on the far side of the car. The intercom was suddenly forgotten. Blades appeared in Cricket's hands, drawn swiftly from the mysterious folds of her clothes. Anouk fumbled for her own knife, realizing too late she left it in the glove box. A girl who looked around 18 years old came out from the copse carrying hedge clippers in one hand and a cigarette in the other. She was lanky at all angles, like a marionette hinged with too many joints, and strawberry hair pulled into a knot. She wore ripped jeans and a white cashmere sweater 2 sizes too big for her. She dropped the cigarette in a patch of mud on the road and stumped it out beneath a black combat boot. "Doesn't work," she said, nodding toward the call box. "Can't use that kind of technology here." "Told you," Cricket growled at Bo. The girl observed them coolly. "You're the beasties everyone's looking for. Every lord of the Hote is searching for you. Did you know that?" Anouk bit her lip. "We didn't kill anyone." "Oh, that." The girl wigged away any concern. "Mata Zola doesn't care if you killed Vitora. All the better if you did. We got a word a few hours ago that she was dead, and we've been celebrating ever since." She motioned to a wheelbarrow full of recycling that held more than a few empty champagne bottles. "I'm Petra," the girl said, "Mata Zola's daughter." She held out a hand to shake, the hedge clippers dangling carelessly from her other hand. Her sweater looked expensive, but threads were plucked loose and snagged, and a few thorns were tangled messily in the seams. The slouchy collar exposed a bony bare shoulder. None of them took her extended hand. Cricket eyed the girl's boots enviously. "A witch's girl?" Anouk said. "There aren't any witches' girls, only boys." Petra let her hand fall and raised a thin, unimpressed eyebrow. "Is that so? Well, for what it's worth, I didn't start out a girl." She put down the hedge clippers, dumped the barrel full of recycling in a bin by the gravel drive, turned back around and took a closer look at Anouk. "Is that a Faustine jacket?" Anouk nodded. Petra made an approving sound. She grabbed the clippers and headed toward the hedge jawl, combat boots crunching over the gravel. "You all look terrified. Come on inside, I'll make you some cocoa." Anouk glanced at Cricket and Bo, who looked as bewildered as she felt. "Didn't start out a girl," Anouk whispered. "Transgender," Cricket whispered back, "like in Luke's fairy tale." She meant the swan mirror. It had been Anouk's favorite. She could almost hear his soft voice now. "Once upon a time." It was about a king who possessed a mirror that showed the heart's true desire. When the king's youngest son peered into it, he saw his own face reflected but changed. A young woman looked back, not a man. His heart's true desire was to be a princess, but such a wish seemed impossible. His footman, the son of a seamstress, observed his master's sorrow, and offered to help him dress as a lady in the privacy of his chambers. Each night the footman snuck into the laundry rooms to borrow dresses from palace courtesans, and he taught his master how to sit and stand and dance in the beautiful clothes. Each morning he returned the dresses, and though the prince treasured these secret evenings, he was not content with merely dressing the part. He sought out an enchantress, who told him that only true love's kiss could grant his desire, but the prince had no true love, and returned to the castle in despair. His footman overheard his sobs, and boldly kissed his tears away. The prince realized that he'd had his true love before him every night, the man who'd danced with him in his borrowed dresses and filled his heart with delight. He kissed his true love and transformed into the young woman he'd seen in the mirror. "You are my prince," the footman said. "Now you are my princess. In any time, in any shape, you'll always be my heart's true desire. I need no mirror to show me this." Anouk pressed a hand to her heart, wishing she could hear Luke's soothing voice telling her once more that, just like in the stories, everything would be all right in the end. Petra stopped before the hedge and squinted at it, then poked at some of the branches. These are sentinel shrubs. They're enchanted to keep everyone out except who we want in. She looked back at them. Get in the car and make sure your hands and head stay inside if you want to keep them. When no one moved, she added, I thought you said you were desperate. Right. Anouk exchanged a long look with the others. They climbed into the car and shut the doors, peering anxiously through the windshield. Petra hunted through the branches until she found a certain one about a foot from the ground that curled in the shape of a corkscrew. She pulled on it, and when nothing happened she kicked at it a few times with her boot until hedges shuddered, and she grinned at them in triumph. Incredibly, the branches started to move. They untangled themselves from one another, drawing back away from the road, and then weaving themselves together to form an archway to allow the car passage. Petra came over to Beau's side and leaned in the open window. Follow the drive all the way to the porte cochere. Don't get out of the car until then, and above all, be careful of your shoes. We have swans. The little monsters crap everywhere. She picked a thorn out of her sweater. I'll ride up front. Where up front? Beau muttered. But she was already climbing on top of the Rolls-Royce hood, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, cradling the hedge clippers in one arm, resting a boot on the silver hood ornament. She tapped twice to signal them to go. Beau didn't move. Anouk whispered, What are you waiting for? How about a sign that we aren't about to drive straight to our deaths? But he put the car in gear, and they rolled forward slowly beneath the eerie archway of branches. They all leaned forward to get a good look at the rippling fields of lavender, bursting purple-blue in perfectly spaced rows. Nestled in the nearest valley was the chateau itself, sun-warmed stone and terracotta roof, with gables and a bell tower and a chimney at each end, though there was no smoke now, nor any sign of life in any of the windows. If it weren't for the breeze stirring it all to life, the entire valley would look like a painting. I'm no gardener, Beau said, but didn't Luke grow lavender in July? Cricket glanced at the calendar on her phone. It's October. None of them said what Anouk assumed they were all thinking. On the property of a witch anything was possible. As they inched along the gravel driveway, Anouk eyed the dark soil at the base of each row, half fearing a glimpse of the odd goblin finger or a decomposing foot. But everything was perfectly tended, lovingly cared for. Something as beautiful as these gardens couldn't possibly grow in chopped-up goblins, could they? Cricket sneezed. As they neared the building, the lavender fields gave way to more traditional gardens dotted with fountains. Anouk cracked open her window and breathed in the smell of roses and lilacs, cypress trees, and the moldy dark odor of standing water. And the topiaries! Dozens of bushes had been clipped into the shapes of people, larger than life, with oversized leafy hands and heads. Their faces were nothing but green masks, blank, sightless, and yet Anouk couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching her. Beau stopped beneath the porte cochere. His hand hovered over the gear shift, ready to throw the car into reverse at the slightest sign of trouble. It's been a real pleasure knowing you both. At least before my death I got to eat those nice crepes and drive on the autoroute Provençale. When we find ourselves churned up into potting soil, don't say I didn't warn you. Anouk smacked him lightly. Cricket smacked him harder. He unlocked the doors and they stepped out into the dying light. The sky was a soft wash of purple, mirroring the fields. Anouk pulled her jacket tighter to block the biting wind. As an afterthought, she grabbed the cat clock and stuffed it into her pocket. Beau took a step toward the chateau and something squished under his foot. He groaned. I told you to be careful, Petra said, sliding off the hood. Swans, man. They crap everywhere. She started toward the house. Beau leaned toward Anouk. Do not drink any cocoa that girl gives you. He looked back at the car longingly before following Petra through the gardens. Anouk stayed back a moment. There wasn't a single yellowed leaf, not one bruised blossom, and as beautiful as it all was, the place felt wrong, frozen in midsummer perfection despite the October chill. Anouk hurried to catch up with the others. Where are the gardeners? She asked, falling in step with them. No gardeners, Petra said over her shoulder. It's only the Mata and me. And it was true, not a single person was out tending the fields. There was no one around but Petra, and she barely seemed to know which end of the hedge clippers to hold. Cricket patted her pockets as if reassuring herself she still had her knives. Petra started up a set of stone stairs overgrown with moss, but stopped as the heavy wooden door was flung open. A woman stood in the shadows of the doorway. Though Anouk couldn't see her face, it had to be Matazola. She felt a strange sort of guilt, as though by being here she was being disloyal to Mata Vitora. She felt a pang of what? Sadness? Grief? Anger? Matazola took a step forward, and the dying sunlight washed over her face. She was beautiful, of course, witches always were, but there was something about her wine-red lips and deep brown eyes that hinted at some ancient lineage, as though before she was French she had been many other things with many other names. Her black hair fell in ripples all the way to the hem of her pale blue blouse, untucked over jeans that were rolled up to the ankles. She took another step forward, barefoot on the stone steps. Her expression seemed both surprised and utterly not surprised at the same time. She made a soft gasp. "You've come back!" Her voice was perfumed yet hearty, like the lavender itself. A delicate gold bracelet circled one wrist, but that was the only ornament she wore, as earthy as her own gardens. Anouk's shoes crunched in the gravel. This was the woman who would protect them from the blankness of what they were before, or curse them to an eternity of it. Cricket whispered, what does she mean by back? Anouk's chest felt electric and tense, like she'd swallowed a swarm of bees. As the sun sank behind the purple hills, a fear kept over her that coming here was the exact mistake that Cricket and Bo had said it was. She hadn't made the mistake of leaving the knife behind again. She dug it out of her pocket and thrust it forward, warning the witch not to come closer. "Stay back." Matazola stopped in front of Anouk, ignoring the knife. She looked at each of them with shining dark eyes that seemed to hold the kind of knowledge that people had killed for. Petra, leaning in the doorway, folded her arms and looked away. "I knew you'd make it back to me," the witch said. "My dearies, my lovelies." Despite the witch's smile, despite the welcoming arms, Anouk was chilled to the marrow. "Now which one of you," the witch said, "is my lost little Cricket?" Chapter 13. 2 days and 4 hours of enchantment remained. No one answered, least of all Cricket. Anouk tried hard not to look at her friend, which might have given her identity away. Matazola gave a soft laugh. "So serious, aren't you, my poor dears? My grim little lovelies. What you must have been through. Come inside and rest. You're safe now. Safe." A tempting word that Anouk didn't dare believe. From all directions the blank faces of topiaries observed her in perfect stillness. She shifted her weight and felt something give way beneath her left shoe. A crushed rose. Its bruised petals were the only imperfect thing in this terribly perfect place. Petra held open the heavy wooden door for them. Anouk felt a jab in the center of her back. "It was your idea to come here," Cricket said in a hard whisper. "You go first." Anouk fidgeted with her jacket, zipping it higher against the evening chill. She closed her eyes and imagined that the wings on the back of the jacket were her wings, gossamer and strong, that the sharp horns sprouted from her head, that she was as rigid and unflinching as a gargoyle. From somewhere inside the house she could hear the crackling of a fire. She stepped across the threshold and ran straight into another topiary. This one was restricted to an enormous clay pot in the center of the chateau's entrance hall. Branches smacked at her face, and she sputtered and fought them off. The bush was clipped into the shape of a bear, though it was overgrown and shaggy with untrimmed leaves. She eyed its branches warily, bones of wood, claws of thorns, fur of leaves, half expecting it to move. "Did the bear get you?" Petra asked, turning round. "We've named him Toblerone, like the chocolate." "Cute," Anouk muttered. She fought back a cough. Apparently no one had dusted Toblerone in ages. They followed Petra down a hallway flanked with the kind of deep-set windows Anouk had seen in books about abbeys and cloisters. Open doors led to rooms that appeared all but abandoned. Her shoes echoed too loud on the stone floors, and she yearned to kick off the stiff Oxford and walk silently and barefoot, like Matazola, but her missing toes had a way of inviting questions she'd rather not answer. They passed an enormous room that might once have been a chapel, and the smell of thyme wrapped around her. She paused and gave it a closer look. Empty, the fireplace cold. But the smell of thyme was fresh, and when she pitched her head to the high rafters, she saw hundreds of bunches of herbs tied up in clove-hitch knots for the drying, the same knots that Luke used. "Were you here hanging these herbs?" she wondered silently, and then a new question crept into her mind. "Are you here still?" She shot Bo and Cricket a look over her shoulder, but they were both too concerned with checking every corner for something that might attack them to notice herbs. As they continued down the hall, Nook realized that no one had dusted anything in ages. Cobwebs spanned the exposed wooden rafters, and clumps of curled dried leaves clustered in the corners, skittering in the drafts. Precarious piles of books lined the hallway as though someone had started to move them from shelf to shelf years ago, but abandoned the project. Trying to read the spines, a nook bumped into a stack and a top book fell open, spilling out dried blossoms that had been pressed between the pages. She picked up a paper-thin rose. "You don't have a maid," she said in surprise. Montezzola stopped. Her eyes went to the cobwebs in the corner. "Is it that obvious? I used to keep house better. For months it's been just the two of us. I'm afraid we've let things go." Anouk could think of two things wrong with the statement. First, they couldn't possibly have been maintaining the entire estate alone. The house was neglected, but the garden wasn't. Despite what Petra had claimed, someone had to be out there watering the flowers. Tricks and whispers couldn't keep a garden that size going forever. And second, they hadn't been alone. Anouk had heard just 2 days ago a person who must have been Matazola talking with someone on Luke's scribe-board. A man. "I don't mind the mess," Anouk clarified, even though she itched to attack it all with a feather duster. "It's admirable that you do your own cooking and cleaning, that you don't use servants." And it was true, the Chateau de Millefleurs wasn't anything like what they'd feared, at least not on the surface. "That's a kind word for how Vittoria treated you," Matazola said. "I might have said slaves." She opened a door to a cozy sitting room that was less dusty than the hall, likely because it seemed to be used more often. There was a large banquet table, though it was covered in books and probably hadn't seen a plate in years, and the portraits, every inch of the high walls, was covered in ornately framed paintings. Anouk turned in a slow circle, taking in the hundreds of painted eyes, feeling the fingertips were walking up her neck. She recognized various royals. There is a painting of Lord and Lady Metham dancing, and one of a rather severe-looking Countess Quine on a horse, and of course multiple paintings of Renard. He was everywhere. It was hard to count exactly how many portraits were of the Crown Prince, but his handsome face seemed to be looking at her from all angles, from above the mantel, from over the threshold, from at least 3 corners. She touched her messy hair, realizing she must look awful. Was he watching? Had he taken notice of her? In all the portraits he was dressed in his frost-gray suit, and had a crown of gold briars. In none of them was he the boy with the mussed hair and scarf who'd shown up on her doorstep. Mon Dieu, Anouk breathed, staring at the portraits. Don't mind them, Madazola said. They don't watch any more, not since I've been banished. They've nothing to watch. Just Petra and me playing cards and pressing flowers. Anouk didn't feel reassured, and as though sensing her thoughts, the witch followed her line of sight to a lifeless portrait of Prince Renard staring back at them with those cool blue eyes. You recognize the prince, she said, somewhat surprised. He came to dinner the night Vittoria died. She paused, clutching the clock in her pocket. Had it truly been 1 day since she had opened the townhouse door and seen him there? Since her life had changed so dramatically? Matazola folded her arms, studying the portrait. Don't get swept up in his influence. It's difficult not to. I know. The power he wields, the way he looks at you as though he sees straight to the person inside you, the person you didn't even know you were. Some say he was born of a Spanish duke and a witch during the Louis XV Wars. Louis XV Wars, but I think he's too patient to bear any witch blood. Assuming a witch could even conceive, I'd guess that he came from old Viking royalty, the fair hair, his fondness for the sea. She gazed at the portrait cryptically. He's been prince for only a few decades. He worked his way up in the ranks over 200 years. In all that time of knowing him, I've yet to figure him out, although I've learned that he's not one to be trifled with. Anouk felt a creeping heat that spread up her neck, a shiver that wasn't entirely unpleasant. She took in other portraits. You're certain they aren't watching us? I promise. Her voice was a purr. She whispered toward the fireplace. Incendie flame. A fire sparked and caught on the dry wood. Petra, our guests look shaken to their cores. Why don't you fetch the cocoa and put everyone at ease? Bring a bag of those tiny marshmallows, too. She rubbed her hands together briskly before the fire. Sit, dearies. She motioned to a dusty divan. Beau looked ready to bolt back to the safety of the car. I'll stand, thanks. He went to the window, wiped away the grime with his sleeve, and peered out at the gardens. What kind of security do you have here? Why, who's chasing you? There was a guarded note in Montezola's otherwise gentle voice. Who isn't? Beau answered. Anouk figured that honesty had gotten them this far. The greatest threat they'd encountered here was being crushed under a filing pile of books, so she might as well continue being truthful. It's Mata Vittoria's boy Vigo, and the assassin called Hunter Black. They've been following us since we left Paris. Vigo thinks we killed his mother. They can't reach you here, Matazola assured them. They can stalk outside the gate and scowl all they want, but they won't set foot on my territory, meager though it is. Anouk's tight shoulders relaxed, though one hand was still curled around the knife in her pocket. But there was that eternal thumping in the other pocket, the clock, not so easy to hide from time. What did you mean? Cricket said in a slightly high tone. When you said that we'd come back, and that name you mentioned. Cricket, was it? Matazola smiled knowingly. Ah, so you're her. Chapter 14. 2 days and 3.5 hours of enchantment remained. Cricket's lips fell open. She lifted her hands, feigning ignorance, as Matazola searched among the portraits until she found what she was looking for, took it down, and handed it to Cricket. Cricket made a gargling sound in her throat and dropped the painting. What is that? That, my lovely, is you. Or rather, what you were. Anouk picked up the frame. It was a simple painting done by an amateur, but one who had a clear fondness for the subject. Maybe Matazola or Petra had even painted it. She held it out to Beau. He left the window and took the portrait. His face wrinkled in confusion as he looked between it and Cricket. It was a cat. White fur and long whiskers, green eyes with a clever kind of look. Anouk couldn't help but think of the pelts in the car trunk. One of them had been white and soft and small, the size of a cat. Judging by the distressed look on Cricket's face, she figured Cricket remembered the same pelt. Merde! Cricket cursed. With her honey-brown skin and light copper eyes, Cricket looked nothing like a cat, especially not this cat. But there were her careful ways, her ability to move silently. Anouk looked closer at the painting and spied something gold at the cat's neck. "Did you see this?" she asked hoarsely. She passed the portrait back to Cricket, pointing at the collar. Cricket's face paled a shade. She clutched the charm earring in her ear self-consciously, but it was useless. They both knew what was stamped on it. Cricket. It was identical to the charm in the painting. Cricket's earring, which Vigo had given her years ago, but hadn't bothered to tell her what it was, had once been part of a collar, a tag. Anouk had rarely let herself wonder about the past, about that frightening cold place, certainly not about what animals they had started life as. Whenever she'd looked through the turret window and seen an animal in the street, she'd turned away sharply and dusted, ignoring the fear rising in her throat. It hadn't been until she'd seen the pelts, a wolf, a dog, an owl, a mouse, and a cat, that she'd let herself play that dangerous matching game. Which was which, and which was she? And now Cricket was the first to learn the truth about herself, and clearly it wasn't welcome knowledge. "It's true, then?" Anouk said. "You knew Cricket before?" Mata Zola replaced the painting on the wall. "Oh, yes, Mata Vitora came here years ago. We got in an awful row. She knew I loved that cat. After she left, I couldn't find it anywhere." Petra carried in a tray of steaming mugs, and Anouk's stomach tugged. She hadn't eaten much at the cafe, but she was hungry for more than just chocolate. She wanted this, everything the room promised: a cozy fire and warm drinks and a mistress who didn't keep servants, who wasn't bothered that her witch's boy had wanted to become a witch's girl, who didn't care if dust bunnies multiplied through the house, who hadn't blinked at Anouk's messy ponytail. And yet, did she dare trust it? She wanted to. They all sat and Anouk took the cocoa with shaking hands. Lavender and honey. Divine. How badly she wanted to drink it. She dared to take the slightest sip. Bo had warned her not to, but Bo was always watching her. "And Anouk and me?" Bo asked hollowly. "Are we from here too?" The witch's face softened. "No, I don't know where the two of you come from, or what creatures you were before. I'm sorry." Cricket had looked dazed for the past few minutes, and now she suddenly stood, fists clenched. "If what you say is true, then we need your help." "Yes, I gathered that, my dear." "You know what she did to us. She made us work for her, and she beat us, and worse." Cricket swallowed. "Now, without her, the spell that keeps us human will expire at midnight on Saturday. We're almost out of time. We need you to recast the enchantment. I can't go back to that." Her eyes flickered toward the cat painting. For a moment all were silent. Anouk wasn't sure why Cricket had decided to trust this witch, after arguing not to come here in the first place. Maybe because of the painting and the collar that matched her earring. If Mata Zola was telling the truth about that, maybe she was telling the truth about everything. "Why?" Petra asked, surprising her. She was standing in the doorway with her arms folded tightly. "Why does it matter to you what form you take? Sleep all day, drink saucers of milk, doesn't sound so bad." Anouk cocked her head, curious about this girl. She remembered now why witches took sons, never daughters. Only females could become witches, so it was fathomable that a daughter might grow up to become a rival witch herself, whereas a son could never threaten their power. Did those same rules apply to a girl who hadn't been born a girl? Petra's question seemed genuinely curious, but Cricket's face turned cold. She snapped, "Because my life is worth more than catching mice." Cricket's stare was vicious, challenging. One more word from Petra, and Anouk had a feeling the blades were going to make an appearance. "It isn't about whether skin or fur covers us," Anouk blurted out, hoping to avoid a fight. "It's about what's beneath that, even beneath bone." All eyes turned to her, and she wished she had kept her mouth shut. These were dark thoughts, thoughts she had ignored her whole life, truths she had looked away from at night, alone in her turret bedroom, when it was hardest to escape them. Her eyes met Beau's. He gave a small nod of encouragement. "Before, for all of us, it was a dark place." Her voice wavered as she continued. "A cold place. I don't mean to say that life was more miserable. I mean that it was empty. Until Madhavatura made me into myself, I wasn't me. What I am, my memories, my dreams, the people I care about, and the thoughts I think about when I'm alone, it means everything to me. Imagine if one day everything that made you who you are simply disappeared. If all you thought of was filling a hungry belly. If the world was cast in shades of gray, not color. If you lost the ability to express yourself in words. If you never loved. If you never dreamed. That's what we stand to lose. Everything." Petra was quiet. She looked shaken. "Restart the enchantment," Anouk said, turning to Matazola. "Grant us the chance to remain ourselves. A lifetime of being perfectly normal. That's all we want. The same as anyone." The witch was quiet for a long time. Her cocoa sat before her, cooled now. The marshmallows melted away. The fire kept crackling. Beau had gone back to standing by the window, but he'd stopped staring out of it, watching for Vigo. Night had fallen at some point. Anouk had barely noticed. "I'd like to help you," Matazola stood, "and I will as best I can. But the spell you are made with isn't just any whisper. It isn't as simple as making flowers bloom year-round or sparkling fire in the kindling. Prince Renard wrote it himself centuries ago. It requires a lengthy whisper with challenging intonations and a tincture of the exact right life essence, not to mention a lot of blood." "I don't mind," Petra said quietly. Anouk realized that Petra, as a witch's girl, must have a blood-letting chair just like Vigo's. She felt a sudden protectiveness for this girl who was willing to drain pints of her blood for them. "Thank you, my dear," Matazola said. "But without the wording of the spell itself, no amount of blood will keep them from turning back." "Madhavatura had the spell," Anouk said in a rush. "We could go back to Paris and fetch it." Matazola shook her head. "Written spells die with their witch. Her copy will be nothing but ash now. The royals have a copy, but spells of that magnitude are kept only in one place, the spell library at Castle Ides. Only members of the Haute who have invitations can access them. I had an invitation, but it was revoked with my banishment." She motioned to the delicate bracelet on her wrist. It looked like jewelry, but was in fact the bond of her imprisonment. "One step beyond the fields and I turn to dust." She swiped a finger along the top of a cabinet, coming away with a fine coating of dust that sizzled when she brushed it into the fire. "But we have only a few days left." Anouk fingered the clock in her pocket with a growing sense of panic. "You mean everything we've risked is for nothing?" She shook her head violently. "It can't all just be lost." The witch looked at her with pity. "How much time do you have left?" Beau said quietly. "About 52 hours." "Then it isn't over yet. There might be a way to extend your enchantment without the original spell, some alternative trick." Anouk found it hard to take comfort from the witch's words. How many hollow promises had Madhavatura made her? Her mood turned sour, nasty. Witches were tricky. We can repay you, if that's what this is about. We can serve you like we served our last mistress. I'm a wonder with a mop. I make a good quiche, too. She didn't mean for her words to sound as bitter as they did. A log popped in the fire. Mata Zola eyed the three of them for a long time. Quiche, mops. There was an oddly electric look in her eyes. You poor dearies. You don't have a clue what you really are, do you? Anouk's breathing felt too fast. A distant voice was ringing in her ears. Prince Renard standing in Mata Vittora's foyer, leaning toward her with those fathomless blue eyes and unsettling words on his lips. You aren't made for sweeping floors, little beastie. From every wall his face watched, his eyes finding hers over and over. She knew that whatever Matazola was about to tell them was what Renard had been referring to, the great mystery revealed. The next few words were about to change their lives forever. Chapter 15. 2 days and 3 hours of enchantment remain. We know what we are, Bo said tensely. Matazola gave him an unmistakably pitying look. Do you? She motioned to the walls of portraits, which, in the flickering firelight, played tricks on Anouk's eyes. The skin tones, ranging from pale white to reddish brown, looked more like real flesh than paint. Matazola pointed to a small portrait of a woman, an ancient witch, judging by her long blue gown, poised on high castle walls above the sea. The beastie's spell is centuries old. Until you were discovered, the last species that anyone knew of lived in Dubrovnik in the mid-1800s. The sea salt witch of Babencook enchanted seals into beautiful women whom she used to lure sailors and their cargo to her fortress. She calls those beasties selkas, but those all died out long ago. After that, the spell was lost to everyone but the Shadow Royals. I don't know how Mata Vittora got her hands on a copy of it, but she did, and she clearly didn't understand its power. She was a fool to think it was meant for creating house servants. The royals would have stopped her if they'd found out, but their kingdom is vast and they can be, well, aloof. They aren't in the habit of taking a second look at maids. In any case, they had no intention of allowing beasties to be made again, not after what happened to the others. What happened to them? Bo asked hesitantly. The Selkas? Oh, the seal women weren't the problem. The royals killed the last Selkas before they could turn dangerous. It was the first ones, the original ones Prince Renard made, that became, over time, unmanageable. The word clouded the air like smoke. Matazola pointed to a portrait of the Shadow Royals that looked just like the one that hung in a gilded frame in the townhouse. There was Renard and Lord and Lady Metham in the center, flanked by lesser royals and a witch at the end of each row. They were in a vast library, all leather-bound books and gleaming brass balconies. In the background stood dozens of figures that weren't painted in as much detail as the rest, maids and butlers, enchanted pretties dressed in black with their eyes averted. A few mischievous goblins were peeking through the doorways. Do you know the 3 orders of the Haute? Matazola asked. The royals, the witches, the goblins, Cricket answered. The royals and goblins have been around at least as long as the pretties have, evolving alongside them but hidden. Born of magic like the pretties are born of flesh. Witches are different. They're born pretty and undergo a change to make themselves magical. It's dangerous. Most don't survive. Matazola smiled. She had survived. Anouk noticed that Petra remained close-lipped during all of this, busying herself by picking thorns from her sweater. She was a witch's girl, and thus privy to the inner workings of the Haute, but she wasn't of the Haute. She'd been born pretty, had a lifespan that would last decades, not centuries. That fact had rankled Vigo. Did it eat away at Petra, too? If so, she hid it better. And do you know about the Vitae echo? Matazola asked. Anouk felt a shiver as though of livers turned to stone, hearts to wood. It is the way in which magic stays balanced, Matazola explained. Whenever handlers use magic to, say, heal a burn or open a locked door, they experience an echo, a consequence, a cost. Magic comes from consuming life, and life demands a tax in return. If it wasn't for the Vitae echo, our magic would be limitless. She crossed the room to a painting of pretties working with wooden contraptions. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the pretties developed more advanced technology and it began to interfere with the Hote's magic. We were able to adapt to the most mechanical technologies created before that. There are certain motor engines and clockwork mechanics that do not hinder our spells. But electricity, new technology like that throws our magic completely into chaos. Magic is thinning, and less magic to go around means more competition, which is being with one another for what power remains. Territory wars. Anouk thought of how Vittora had fabricated a lie about insubordination to get Zola banished. Prince Renard foresaw this as far back as the late 18th century. He wanted to create something to rewrite the balance, as he knew technology would continue to grow, something powerful enough that it wouldn't be limited by Vitae echo. Her eyes flashed brighter. Renard wasn't a prince then, not yet. He was a spell scribe with an idea. He wrote a spell to create a fourth order, beasties. None of the portraits showed mice or horses or women with the skins of seal, and the witch's eyes shifted to the three of them, as though they were painted figures come to life that needed no gilded frames. Her lips stretched into a smile. Prince Renard's intention was that beasties would look human, be human, on almost all accounts, but that their souls, as animals, would reside in the natural world. The Vitae echo, you see, is uniquely tied to the human world, the world of morals and sin. By contrast, the natural world lies outside of the echo. There is no sin for beasties because you are not moral creatures, but natural ones, and thus you are not bound by the Vitae echo. Renard believed this would make you limitless in his attempts to right the balance of power. He created your kind as saviors. Anouk studied the portrait of Renard, trying to discern the truth, but it was only a facsimile of him. His painted eyes, so darkingly teasing, almost as real as the eyes of a boy who had stood on her doorstep, but not quite. Only the real Renard could answer the still-forming questions in her head. A shiver of vertigo washed over her, and she touched her brow, felt something like the start of a fever. She rested her forehead against the cool glass of a window. "You're saying we can do magic?" Cricket's voice was skeptical, but Anouk knew she believed the same thing. "My dearie, I don't think you understand. I'm not talking about cheap magic that even goblins can do. I'm saying that beasties are the most powerful order of the Hote. More powerful, even, than the royals who made them. You can take life without repercussions, and thus wield unheard-of magic." None of them spoke. All those painted eyes, all of him, the most powerful order? She was a girl who spent her days dreamily gazing out windows, making frosted cakes just so Beau could lick the spoon, listening to Luke tell her stories. A maid, not a magic handler, and certainly no one's savior. Had Vittora really never known this? Beau was facing away from the fireplace, his expression lost to shadows. He seemed oddly distant. He suddenly grabbed his gloves from the entry table. "Lies," he spat. "She's a liar just like Madame Vittora. Come on, Anouk. Cricket. We're getting out of here." He grabbed Anouk's hand and started to pull her down the hallway into the foyer. "Beau, stop!" Anouk wrested her hand away. "I'm not leaving. I'm begging you," he said, lowering his voice. "Don't listen to her. She's just like Madame Vittora." Before he disappeared, Luke... He stopped short as though thinking better of what he'd been about to say. "What about Luke?" When he didn't answer, Anouk pressed, "Do you know where he is? Is he here?" When he still didn't answer, she hissed, "You treated me with kid gloves my whole life, Beau. Be honest with me now. I can take it." Beau looked away as though he didn't like this fiercer version of Anouk. I only know that Luke didn't trust Madavatora. You loved her too much to see it, but Luke saw it, and Cricket did, and so did I. And I'm telling you that I see that same glimmer of scheming now. That witch's words are honeyed poison. But I think I can do magic, she insisted. In the closet, I whispered for us to be protected, and it worked. He ran a hand over her short hair. Listen, I watched Madavatora beat Luke. I watched her let Vigo try to put his hands all over Cricket. I watched her cut off your toes, Anouk, and all that time I did nothing. I let Luke handle it. All. But he needed help as much as we did. His eyes were full of ghosts. In the car on the way here, there was something I was trying to tell you. The fairy tale of the peasant boy and the princess, she hadn't forgotten. He took her hand and the tension broke. He was gentle now and more than a little bit awkward. I wasted our time together being too much of an idiot to tell you. In Luke's story, do you remember what the peasant boy says to the princess in the end? Only a fool would risk a monster's impalement for love, she recited, and I'm a fool. He squeezed her hand, his blue eyes searching hers. I'm a fool, Anouk. She wanted to stuff her hands in her pockets, find some charm to tell her what to say. The knife, the mint, the clock. Useless. She closed her eyes. Bo. Like Cricket said, we only have each other now. You're my Princess Anouk. I've loved you since the first time I wiped a streak of dust off your face, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Her hand felt shaky in his. He loved her? He joked about such things, always giving her messy kisses on the cheek. She'd never quite realized that it wasn't all in jest. He cupped her face, leaning in, and for a second she thought he might kiss her, but he whispered, I'm telling you this so you know why we have to leave. She isn't like Madavatora, Anouk insisted. There aren't servants here. She's broken the rules to have a daughter, not a son. Cricket trusts her, at least a little. Cricket just wants to learn dark spells so that she can slice the royals into little pieces. Anouk fingered the mint deep in her pocket, worried nearly to dust. What if Zola could prove it to us? Prove that we're more powerful than the Hote? How? I have an idea. He didn't look convinced. In fact, he looked like he might throw her over his shoulder and carry her, kicking and screaming, to the car. But he didn't, and it dawned on her that something had changed between them in the past few minutes, some subtle shift of power, and she knew without having to ask that he would do whatever she requested of him. It was a power she hadn't asked for, wasn't even sure she wanted, but it was there. Trust me, Bo. She stood on tiptoe to press a kiss to his cheek, and felt him shudder with longing in response. He didn't argue as she led him back to the sitting room. Mata Zola stood from the armchair. For a small woman, she had a way of filling every corner of the room like a clap of rolling thunder. Anouk pointed to the fire. Teach me a spell, witch. Chapter 16. 2 days and 2 hours of enchantment remain. Mata Zola smiled slowly. Very well, but not the fire trick. That one's finicky. She went to a bouquet of red roses and plucked off the fattest blossom. The firelight cast shadows over half her face, and Anouk felt herself drawn to which all the more. Mata Zola held the rose out in open palms. Take it, dearie. We weren't allowed powder in this house, but not all spells require such complexity. Sometimes a simple rose can do the job. Anouk hesitated, but she'd gotten them into this, and she couldn't change her mind now. She popped the rose in her mouth. The petals felt wrong against her tongue, like she was eating perfumed silk. She forced it down. Mata Zola nodded. A rose alone isn't enough to perform most enchantments, but it can create a light breeze, make someone forget what he is about to say. She looked at Bo. Put someone to sleep, like your handsome friend. Bo grunted. Why do I have to be the victim? Madazola ignored him and rested her hands on Anouk's shoulders. Feel the life of the flower spreading through you, from your stomach to your throat to your tongue to your fingertips, and whisper after me. Dorma, dorma, sonara, prissimo. Anouk paused. Are you okay with this, Bo? He muttered. Go ahead. For all the resignation in his voice, there was a trace of curiosity, too. Anouk's throat felt scratched raw from the rose, and yet the pain had woken her body in some way. She closed her eyes, raised her fingertips, and whispered, Dorma, dorma, sonora, prissimo. I don't feel anything. You. Bo collapsed to the oriental rug. It happened in less than half a breath. His head hit the edge of a chair as he fell, but he didn't cry out, didn't move. It was so fast that Anouk had barely finished speaking. Bo! She dropped to her knees. She held her breath until he suddenly shuddered and let out a raking snore, and she sighed with relief. You did it, Cricket whirled on Petra. Give me one of those roses. Petra held her back from the vase. Who are you going to enchant? We can't have all of you passed out and useless. But Cricket was fast enough to grab a rose anyway. She stuffed it in her mouth and coughed out something vaguely resembling a spell. Nothing happened. Petra smirked. They call it the silent tongue for a reason, not the yawping squawk. Cricket narrowed her eyes as she spat out chewed-up petals. Anouk stroked Bo's hair, worried, and looked up at the witch. How long will he be out? Until morning, I'd imagine, said Madazola. It was a large rose. Despite herself, a part of Anouk felt relieved. No more of Bo trying to drag her back to the car, and the thought made her feel guilty. She brushed a clump of dust out of his hair. We'll put him to bed in the west bedroom, Madazola said. He'll be safe there until he wakes. She rested one hand on Anouk's shoulder and the other on Cricket's. You should rest too, dearies, though I know it won't be easy. You look dead on your feet. I want to try that spell again, Cricket said. Patience, dearie, patience. The witch made a small tsk noise. You can't do magic properly if you don't have a rested mind. But I could help you look through the spell books, Cricket insisted. No, Madazola's voice was firm, but then she softened it with a gentle pat on the first Cricket's, and then Anouk's cheek. She turned to Petra. Show them to the bedroom. Petra was already picking up Bo's feet. Anouk and Cricket had little choice but to help her hoist him up, and groaning under his weight, the three girls carried him down the hallway and up a flight of stairs to a bedroom. They placed him on the bed. Petra handed Anouk a glass lamp. Good night. Try to sleep. Did you know you have a streak of dust on your face? Anouk sighed. Always. She swiped her sleeve over her cheek and fluffed the pillow under Bo's head. He felt warm. She went to open a window. The clouds were heavy, casting a murky glow over the fields. She sucked in a breath as she caught sight of a tremor of movement in the fields. Petra, there's something out there. Petra, unconcerned, lit another gas lamp for them. Those are just the gardeners. They tend to the flowers at night. I thought you said you two were alone here. We are, Petra answered. The creeping feeling spidered up Anouk's spine as she peered closer at the gardens. A flash of leaves caught in the faint light. The topiaries. Their enchanted shapes loomed as they weeded and watered and pruned with their slow lumbering branches. A gleam in the driveway caught her eye and she jerked to attention, thinking at first it was a gunmetal gray motorcycle, but it was only a watering can. You're certain no one can get through the hedges? She asked, turning from the window. But Petra was gone. A key turned in the lock. Hey! Anouk and Cricket both ran to the door. Petra, you can't lock us in here. Anouk twisted the knob uselessly. Cricket kicked at the door. It's for your own safety. Petra's muffled voice came from the keyhole. I promise it's better this way. Nights around here can get unpredictable. I'll unlock it at the first light. Anouk and Cricket pounded on the door, calling for Petra, but there was no response. Frustrated, Anouk sank onto the bed. Our own safety? That's rubbish. I guess that Zola doesn't want us snooping through her things, Cricket said, sitting cross-legged on the other side of Bo. Witches, you know, secretive to the bone. I'm surprised that we're not wrapped in chains or some dungeon. Do you think Zola is telling the truth about the spell library at Castle Ides? Cricket took out a knife, tapped the hilt anxiously in her palm. I don't know what to believe. Anouk lowered her voice. There is a room here with herbs hanging in the rafters, tied up in the same clove hitch knot Luke uses. Cricket considered this. You think he was here? Yes. Or, I know this sounds crazy, he's here now. And what? Matazola has him bound and gagged in a closet? That's what she doesn't want us to snoop around and find? Maybe. Anouk eyed Bo, who was muttering in his sleep. I think Bo knows more than he's letting on. He promises that he didn't kill Mata Vitora, but I think that he knows who did. Cricket's expression turned grim. I still think Vigo did it. He isn't capable of love, not even for his mother. You know what I'd like most to do with what little time I have left? Find him and smother him with that stupid slouchy hat of his. At the mention of Vigo, Anouk looked back at the window where she thought she'd seen the motorcycle. She cocked her head. Cricket, does Vigo have an invitation to Castle Ides? Why? What are you plotting, and why didn't I think of it first? Anouk lay back on the pillows, drumming her fingers on her ribs, thinking. Maybe something, maybe nothing. Well, he does. It wasn't a large bed, and she was pressed against all 6 feet of Bo. At home, sometimes she and Bo had fallen asleep in bed together, Luke occasionally snoring in her armchair, but that was before Bo's confession in the foyer. Only a fool, and I'm a fool. She wasn't sure what to do with those words, which were mixing around in her stomach like champagne bubbles, but she knew that sometime in the past few days he'd ceased to be like a brother to her. He was something else, something more. But how much more? Cricket lay down on Bo's other side, toying with her charm earring distractedly, her foot anxiously jiggling enough to make the whole bed shake. Anouk reached across Bo and took Cricket's hand. Cricket stopped tapping her foot. They interlaced their fingers and held it tight. A mouse, a dog, a wolf, a cat, an owl, Anouk thought, all predators and prey. If the worst happened, would they turn on one another? She found herself scratching her arm as though fur were already pushing its way out. I want to cast magic, Cricket said quietly, a private admission. I want to show the royals that they aren't the only ones who matter. Anouk thought of those dark spells Cricket had found on the internet and scrolled down. Cricket wanted revenge, and that made Anouk uneasy. And yet, didn't Cricket deserve it? Didn't they all? You'll learn, I know it. It's easier for me because I already speak a bit of the silent tongue. Yeah, that, and your whispers actually sound like proper whispers, not like someone coughing up a hairball. She squeezed Anouk's hand. Anouk squeezed back. The clock was ticking on the table, that black cat's tail always moving in a constant circle. Tick, tick, tick. Bo snored softly. She envied him his enchantment. Tonight, she knew, he was the only one who would get any sleep. Chapter 17. 1 day and 17 hours of enchantment remain. Anouk was wrong. At some point exhaustion overcame her, and she tossed and turned and dreamed of awful things. Luke, bloodless and drained, haunting the halls of the chateau, leaving time leaves skittering in his wake. She sat up with a jerk. Sunlight warmed the window. Bo still slumbered beside her. The other side of the bed was empty. The door was open, to her relief. Someone had left fresh clothes for her, oversized scraggly sweaters that looked as though they belonged to Petra. She pulled one over her black dress and rolled up the long sleeves and went into the hall. She called for Cricket, but got no answer, so she followed the smell of burnt toast to the kitchen. Cricket and Petra were trying to toast bread over an open flame, and judging by the pile of charred ash, failing miserably. Anouk took the tongs out of Petra's hand and dumped their efforts in the trash. "Sit," she said. "I'll cook. Petra, do you have any eggs?" Obviously relieved, Petra went to the icebox for bacon and eggs, and then disappeared into the pantry for more ingredients. Anouk whispered to Cricket, "Where's the Mata? Supposedly she hasn't left the potting shed all night. She's in there experimenting with different spells." Petra returned the jars of whole golden honeycomb and canisters of rich black coffee, and they quieted. Once the toast was ready, Petra served herself a generous portion and slathered the top piece with creamy butter. "Something odd happened this morning," she chewed with her mouth open, licking butter off her finger. "I went back to the hedge to fetch the wheelbarrow, and heard a motorcycle pull up at the gate, and then what sounded like two boys arguing about how to get in. Then they drove off. I figured it might be a friend of yours." Anouk exchanged a look with Cricket. Hunter Black and Vigo, not friends. Petra took a hefty bite of toast. "It doesn't matter. They can attack the hedge with a chainsaw, try to scale it with ladders, but they can't get in." She didn't seem to notice, or else didn't care about the crumbs collecting on her sweater. Anouk returned to making breakfast, this new information stirring in her mind, mixing together like eggs and flour for cake batter. All this time she and Beau had wanted to keep them out, but maybe out was wrong. Maybe she wanted them in. She spooned the dough into a cookie sheet, then popped it into the oven, then poured fresh coffee for herself. "I'm going to see what Mata Zola's found." She grabbed a timer and set it for the cookies. "Take them out in 20 minutes." She cupped her hands around the mug to warm them as she passed through the halls. It was a drafty old house. In the foyer she was surprised to find a trail of smudgy paw prints all around Toblerone's pot. Had he moved during the night? She started for the front door, then stopped, glancing back at the bear. She'd cast magic last night. Could she do it again? Slowly, almost on a whim, she plucked a leaf off Toblerone's shaggy coat, popped it in her mouth, swallowed it whole, and then cocked her fingers as she'd seen Madame do. "Abenate," she whispered. "Wake." A row of leaves shuddered along the bear's spine, and just as when she'd put Beau to sleep, the spell worked instantly. She jumped back, dripping coffee everywhere. "Oh, merde!" She rubbed at the coffee stain on Petra's sweater, then looked back at the bear, wetting her lips. "Aperte oculus." Open your eyes. Incredibly, the bear's head started to sway slightly side to side, his branching bones creaking to life, the jaws open, showing teeth of sharp briars. Anouk stepped back, ready to run, but the bear only stretched his jaws in a great yawn. The head swung to her, and lips parted like eyes opening. He blinked. She couldn't help but give an amazed sort of laugh. Something fell out of the bear's mouth and clattered to the floor. Voices sounded from down the hall, and Anouk quickly whispered a spell to put the bear back to sleep. She snatched up the fallen object. A franc coin. A small hole was drilled in the top, as though for a necklace. It was just like the one she'd found in Luke's attic. She sniffed it. Time. She shoved it into her pocket and went to the window. A light was on in the potting shed. If Anouk was ever going to find out what they were hiding, now was the time. She opened the front door and closed it loudly so Petra would think she'd gone outside. Then she kicked off her shoes and crept down the hall past empty rooms until an oddly bright light in the chapel caught her eye. One of the stained glass windows was now cracked open. The light from the other side was too low to be the sun. A secret room. She peered through the stained glass window. It was dark beyond except for that one blindingly bright light. Two lights, actually, headlights. She almost laughed. The secret passage led to a garage filled with shiny cars that would make Beau drool. She kept searching the house, going past the bedroom where Beau slept, past more deserted rooms, and reached one with posters on the wall for bands called Daft Punk and Louise Attack. That must have been Petra's. Anouk stepped into Petra's room, uncertain what she was looking for. She opened a door that led to a bathroom that, like everything else, was in desperate need of a mop. She tried a side door that she'd assumed led to a closet until she heard an oddly familiar sound. Quiet, steady breathing. She took a step into the dark room, tripped on something metal that went clanging across the room, and cursed. She held her breath for a few seconds, cringing, but thankfully didn't hear the footsteps or Petra's voice. As quietly as she could, she felt around for a candle, lit it, and found that she was in a windowless room. Petra's bloodletting chair was on one side, along with the usual glass vials and copper collecting bowls, like the one she'd tripped on. On the other side of the room was a scribeboard. Its machinery gave that steady breathing sound just like Luke's, and feathered headphones chattered with unintelligible whispers. She opened the desk drawer, rifled through the papers until she found Petra's log, and flipped the pages until she saw his name. 10 August. Received another message from Vittor's gardener. Luca? Luke? 11 August. Wants to make a deal. Gave no response. 13 August. On his way to Chateau, couldn't stop him. Tell the Mata. Anouk gripped the franc coin. Luke had been there. Matazola had lied to them, and here was proof. She ran downstairs and into the garden, over stone paths that were damp on her feet, realizing too late that she'd left her shoes inside. She banged on the potting shed door. Let me in, witch! Luke is here, I know it. Matazola opened the door. She had dark circles beneath her eyes. The shed smelled of wood smoke and something bitter, and Anouk stopped a bubbling pot of jars and tonics amid the shovels and clay pots. Anouk held up the franc coin like an accusation. Come in. Matazola's voice was calm. She motioned casually to the vials and bottles. I'm concocting a tonic that I found in a Persian spell book from the 14th century. It's used to slow one's aging process. If it works, it might buy you and your friends another few days until your proper age catches up with you. I need thorns and a couple more ingredients from the garden before it will be ready for testing. Anouk clenched her jaw, focusing on why she'd come. I found the scribeboard logs. Luke, he was here, yes, the witch admitted, cutting her off. He isn't anymore. Then where is he? He disappeared a week and a half ago. Matazola shook her head, returned to her pot, and stirred it slowly. I'm afraid I can't answer that. He was here 2 months ago, long before you say he disappeared. She set down the spoon and her eyes dropped to Anouk's bare feet, to the missing toes, but she didn't seem surprised. She picked up an empty bottle. Take a walk with me. Anouk wasn't inclined to obey, but neither did she want to stay in that reeking shed. She followed the witch into the gardens. Luke said that you loved your mistress so much that you didn't see the rotten part of her. Anouk didn't answer. How could she? Yes, she understood how vile their mistress had been, and yet the memory of her soft hand stroking Anouk's hair was still too fresh. Your friend Luke contacted me 2 months ago, and when I didn't answer, he showed up at the gates with an awful story to tell. He'd overheard Mata Vittora negotiating with a goblin broker who dealt in small mammals. She wanted 4 very tame, very mild-tempered rabbits, young and in good health. Anouk slowed. I remember that. She wiped her hands on her sweater, though they were already clean. Luke thought he was supposed to slaughter them for stew, but he was wrong. Mata Vittora was furious. Did you ever wonder why she wanted 4 live rabbits? Anouk curled her toes. No. Matazola stopped at a nettle plant and pulled off long spiky leaves to go in the bottle. According to Luke, she felt that her beasties were growing restless. He and Cricket and Bo were more disobedient every day, and the assassin hunter Black had become too attached to her boy, so she decided she'd kill her beasties and start over with more docile creatures. Anouk felt as though she'd been slapped. She pressed her hand to her cheek, feeling a sting she couldn't make stop. She was going to keep you, the witch continued evenly. She bought only 4 rabbits, not 5. You were her pet, her obedient little beastie. Had the day suddenly gotten darker? Anouk looked up, but no clouds blocked the sun. Was it true? Of course it was. She felt like a traitor, like she'd somehow sided with Vittora, that she was complicit just by sweeping floors and serving cake. What happened then? She asked. I explained to Luke that whoever possessed your pelts possessed you. If he could steal the pelts, then he wouldn't be forced to answer to any mistress. He left, and I haven't heard from him since. Of course, that advice was true only as long as your witch was alive. Now you have much bigger problems. Even if you had control of your pelts, the beastie spell would still expire. Oops. I have to charge the nuke now. The nook now. Okay, this is the wrong cord. I forget sometimes where I've put it. The actual charging cable. And this one's for the camera. But the one for the nuke is over here. I think this might be it. Yep, this is it. I found it. Okay. Well, in that case, I'll go ahead and plug this in. Oops. I'll go ahead and plug that in, and yeah, it's charging now. And I'll just let it charge. I guess I'll say goodbye for now. So thank you for listening. I'll be reading more soon. Goodbye for now.